They say nothing in life is certain except for death and taxes. Now, I don't know about death, but taxes can be a pain. Now, nobody likes paying taxes, so the least the government can do is make the process of paying taxes as simple, as straightforward as possible. But sadly, that's not to be. And today I'm going to talk about property taxes in Bengaluru. So if you're in Bengaluru, if you own property here and plan on paying property taxes here, this video might be helpful. So if you did not already know, BBMP is the government body that is responsible for property tax in Bengaluru. Now, talking about how property tax is calculated, there is something called a zone classification that you need to know about. If you go on to Google and search for BBMP zone classification, you will be presented with a list of areas. You can identify which one of them is yours, and then under that you will see various zone classifications. So the way zone classifications are set up is it goes from, I think, A to F, F being the least developed and therefore the least taxed, and going up to A, which is the most developed areas and therefore the most taxed zones as well. So you'll have to figure out which zone your property falls in and your tax gets calculated accordingly. Now, the zone classification itself is not very specific, as you can see in this PDF, and try to find out in which zone your property falls in. Now, as I mentioned, it's not very specific. You'll have to do some amount of permutations and combinations to finally come up with and say which zone could be yours. So there is no definitive answer saying that this property is in this zone. You'll have to figure out based on landmarks and whatnot and try to come up to the best guess. So that's problem number one. You do not have a definite classification. You'll have to depend on some kind of landmarks and proximity to these landmarks and so on and so forth. Now, let's say you have identified your zone, and let's say in 2021, when you are paying tax, this is the kind of system or portal that you had to log into. So you would log in and there is this checkbox which talks about is there any change in your property or usage of that property. You would obviously say no and proceed to the form. The form is again pretty straightforward, and once you're done with the form, you will get an option of an online payment gateway and make that payment and you get a receipt. The question that you would be wondering about is, but where was this zone that we just identified? Well, funny part is there was no zone selection in that entire form. Everything said and done, you paid your tax depending upon whatever came up on that portal, and now you have a receipt in your hand. Now, if you look at that receipt, it says that the zone classification that was declared by you is C. But now I'm wondering, like, when did I do this zone selection? Well, funny part is you did not select it while making the payment. So where did it get this zone classification? The system basically picked it up from the last year's tax payment. So whatever zone classification you had chosen last year is what gets picked up this year. So then you'll ask, but I did not choose any in the last year either. So the thing is, whatever was the zone classification when this property came into existence, and that is the property tax that you paid for the first time, the same thing is getting continued year over year. In the normal course of events, like we saw, you do not get that option. Now you will ask, then how do I go about changing or selecting the zones classification correctly? So now I'll take you back to that login screen where there was this checkbox. That checkbox is the only way you can change your zone classification while making a property tax payment. So this was a case till last year, and what a lot of people did not realize was they were paying the tax without really choosing the correct zone classification. It would have been perfectly fine if the zone classification would not have changed. But BBMP in 2016-2017, the year of 2016-2017, went ahead and changed the zone classifications, right? So it looked at maybe a property which was in zone D would now, after 2016-2017, could be in zone B. But the person who was paying the tax, like you and me, they did not know about this, or maybe they were not informed about this by BBMP, and they continued paying tax depending upon whatever the zone classification was in the very first year. This continued, so people are still paying the same amount of tax every year without really understanding or realizing that the zone classification changed in 2016, and therefore the tax payment should also have changed, but that did not happen. And now BBMP could have informed people, okay, in 2016, 2017, when the new zone classification came, that okay, you have paid your property tax, but your zone classification is wrong. If they had done that, the people, the taxpayers would have corrected their mistake and paid the right tax. But BBMP did not do that either. That is mistake number 2. So people continued paying the tax the same way. BBMP did not raise the issue over the years. But so 2016-17 went, 18-19-20 went. In 2021 is when BBMP finally woke up and said, okay, you guys, taxpayers, you have not been paying the right tax. The zone classifications changed in 2016-17, but you are still paying it based on the wrong zone, the old zone, which happens to be wrong. So therefore, now you are liable for penalty, and you're also liable for paying interest on that penalty. That's not fair, right? One is you did not tell us or inform the taxpayers that the zones have changed. Second is, if that change had happened and people have paid the tax, they should have raised it then and there, like in 2017 itself. But that did not happen either. So those are 2 mistakes, and a lot of people did get those notices last year around August, and that led to a lot of furore as well. People complained and all of that, but I think a lot of people still had to pay that penalty either ways. Now all said and done, BBMP said, okay, maybe the system is not correct, we need to make changes to it and all of that. And they said this year onwards, and that's when they said, okay, we have revamped our system. Now the system or the portal ensures that the zone classification is automatically picked up, and the tax is also calculated automatically. So you, the taxpayer, does not have to do any checking or choosing of zones. Everything is taken care of by the system. Great. So now this year when I'm paying my tax, again, I'm expecting it's the BBMP system. I'm expecting issues, and there are issues, right? So what is that issue is what I'm going to talk about next. So today is when I was paying my tax. So I log into the portal. Now if you see, this checkbox is checked by default and you cannot change it. That means you will get to see the zone classification by default. So I log in, I get my OTP, I logged in, I went into the system, and now when I look at the system, I can see that the zone classification, the old one and the new one, are automatically populated here. In 2008 onwards, it was classified as zone D, and in 2016 onwards, it's classified as zone B. So DB is what they are calling it, calling my property to be. So now you can also see a note over here which says that you had chosen it as C, DC, which is D in 2008 and C 2016 onwards. But the ARO, the revenue officer, thinks that it should be DB. And that is going to be the DB as in D in 2008 onwards, B 2016 onwards. So great, right? So the system is actually telling me what the correct zone classification should be, which is how it should have been in the first place. Great, better late than never, as they say, but let's see what the issues could be. So I think the system has been corrected and it should give me the right thing. So again, it shows me the tax that should be paid. It gives me that online option. I go to the payment gateway, pay it, well and good. Now let's see the receipt. The receipt, when I open, it still shows me that the zone classification chosen by me. Again, I did not choose anything, the system chose it for me, but the receipt says that I chose C. And funnily, the amount of tax that was paid is 5640, which is the same amount that I paid last year when I had classified my zone as C. So basically the system says that my zone classification is B, but the tax has been calculated as per zone C. And the final receipt also shows the same amount as well as the zone classification. So basically I'm still stuck with this wrong zone classification and a wrong tax payment. Now, how is BBMP gonna bring this up? Who are they gonna penalize this time? Most probably the taxpayers. So again, I am keeping my fingers crossed. If you are paying tax in Bengaluru, I would suggest keep a recording of the process of paying your tax, so that at a later point of time when a notice does come, you'll have proof to show that this is what happened. This is what your system did. Now, how is it going to pan out in the coming days is anybody's guess, but I am keeping my fingers crossed. I hope this video helps you at a future point of time, and if it does, do consider subscribing.